The Great Understanding. Why You Were Disconnected from Kemet by Ru of House of Keperu. You want to understand why we were disconnected from the teachings of Kemet? Then first understand what Kemet represented. Kemet was not simply temples, monuments, and mysterious symbols waiting for somebody thousands of years later to call them mythology. Kemet developed government, law, medicine, mathematics, architecture, scribal education, agriculture, astronomy, philosophy, ritual, literature, and systems for thinking about human behavior across thousands of years. And because Kemet occupied extraordinarily valuable territory, possessed agricultural wealth along the Iteru, controlled important trade routes, and accumulated enormous political and cultural prestige, foreign powers repeatedly fought over that land. Assyrians came, Persians came, Macedonian Greeks came, Romans came, later powers came. But understand something important. Conquest does not prove that everybody invaded Kemet simply to steal spiritual knowledge. Empires conquer for land, wealth, trade, security, labor, and power. Yet conquest absolutely creates something else, the opportunity for the conqueror to reinterpret the conquered. And once political power changes hands, Ren becomes battlefield. Names change, languages change, institutions change, sacred places receive new meanings, old traditions survive, merge, disappear, or are translated through somebody else's worldview. Eventually, generations can inherit the conqueror's vocabulary without realizing they are looking at an older civilization through younger eyes. Think about the irony. Later Christian writers could classify older religious traditions as pagan, while Christianity itself emerged in a Mediterranean world already saturated with older philosophical and religious ideas. That does not mean Christianity, Judaism, or Islam can simply be reduced to copies of Kemet. The historical relationships are much more complicated. But it does mean that religions do not develop inside cultural vacuums. Ideas travel, symbols travel, philosophical questions travel, stories change while moving between civilizations. And then comes one of history's greatest acts of perception. Even the name Kemet becomes secondary in the modern imagination, while the Greek-derived name Egypt becomes dominant, and eventually, an entire academic discipline studies the civilization under the name Egyptology. Think about the psychological consequence. A people can become internationally famous while the name they used for their own land becomes unfamiliar to millions. That is why Ren matters. But even that is not the deepest loss. Because if all we recover from Kemet are ankhs, pyramids, crowns, and beautiful Medu-Neter, we have recovered the appearance while missing the science of the philosophy. The deeper treasure was observation. The people of Kemet observed the heavens. They observed the Iteru. They observed medicine. They observed death. They observed cycles. They observed administration, and critically for this teaching, they observed human behavior. Look at the conflict of Heru and Set. Do not imprison it inside a Western framework of God versus devil. That comparison can help a modern listener initially, but it can also distort the original cosmology. Heru and Set were far more complex than absolute good and absolute evil. Yet symbolically, their struggle gives us something extraordinary to contemplate. Conflicting forces can exist within the same order. And human beings know this struggle intimately. Every person possesses the capacity for discipline and impulse, truth and deception, courage and fear, reciprocity and selfishness, creation and destruction. You do not need to believe in an invisible devil to explain greed. Study the human being. You do not need a demon to explain cruelty. Study the human being. You do not need supernatural possession to understand manipulation. Study psychology, incentives, trauma, ego, fear, power, conditioning, and behavior. The battlefield is closer than mythology taught you to look. Then Kemet gives us another powerful conceptual opposition: Ma'at and Isfet. Ma'at concerns truth, balance, right order, justice, reciprocity, proper relationship. Isfet concerns disorder, falsehood, injustice, disruption. And here is where this becomes dangerous to any person who benefits from confusion. Isfet does not always look chaotic. A society can have magnificent buildings and still exploit human beings. It can have courts and still produce injustice. It can have laws and still legalize oppression. It can have enormous wealth while millions struggle to survive. It can call itself civilized while practicing domination. External order does not automatically equal Ma'at. Sometimes the most sophisticated form of Isfet is chaos wearing the clothing of order. Now you begin understanding why recovering these concepts matters. They give you another vocabulary for examining civilization itself. Instead of asking only, is it legal, ask, is it Ma'at? Instead of asking, is it profitable, ask, is it reciprocal? Instead of asking, is everybody doing it? Ask, what does it produce? Instead of blindly inheriting morality, investigate cause and consequence. And now we arrive at Ren and Heka. Ren, the name, identity, remembrance, the continuation by which something is known. Heka, the effective power associated with speech, ritual, intention, and creative agency in comedic thought. Do not turn these into conspiracy buzzwords. Understand the mechanisms they help us examine. If I control what something is called, I can influence how future generations perceive it. If I repeatedly associate a people with particular images, I can influence expectations about them. If I create rituals that children repeat before they understand their meaning, those rituals can become part of identity. If I repeat a message through sermons, classrooms, advertising, television, movies, music, political slogans, and social media, repetition can normalize the message. Modern psychology has names for parts of this: conditioning, framing, priming, social learning, propaganda, identity formation. Kemet gives us another lens through which to contemplate the power of naming and expression. Look at ritual. A child can memorize a pledge before understanding nationalism. A child can memorize a prayer before understanding theology. A child can inherit the words God, Lord, and Jesus before knowing their linguistic histories or the cultures through which those English forms reach them. That does not automatically make the words evil. It demonstrates how Ren is inherited before Ren is examined. And Heka asks another question. What happens when inherited words are repeated thousands of times? They become emotionally charged. They become connected to family, safety, fear, identity, salvation, community. Eventually, questioning a word can feel like questioning the self. That is psychology. The same mechanism operates outside religion. Flags, brands, celebrities, political parties, money, national myths, racial categories, movies, music, images. Repetition trains association, and association influences perception. Whoever can influence perception can influence behavior, but nobody owns your mind once you learn to observe your own conditioning. That is where Keperu enters. My purpose is not to replace one programming system with another. I do not want you escaping somebody else's vocabulary merely to become imprisoned inside mine. I want you to understand the mechanism. Examine the Ren. Examine the Heka. Examine the repetition. Examine the emotional trigger. Examine the incentive. Examine the behavior. Examine the consequence. Then ask whether what remains is Ma'at or Isfet. Observe. Question. Understand. Practice. Transform. And let me remove another layer of mythology. Freemasons and other esoteric organizations have certainly used symbols associated with antiquity, including imagery from Kemet. But we do not need to imagine a secret group possessing supernatural knowledge of Ren and Heka to explain mass influence. The mechanisms are operating publicly every day. Advertising studies attention. Political campaigns study emotion. Corporations study consumer behavior. Social platforms study engagement. Entertainment studies audience response. Institutions understand repetition because repetition works. The secret is hiding in plain sight because most people experience the mechanism without studying the mechanism. That is the disconnection that concerns me most. Not merely that we forgot Kemet. We forgot to study ourselves. We became experts at consuming messages without understanding how messages affect us. Experts at repeating words without examining their origins. Experts at defending identities we did not consciously construct. Experts at reacting emotionally before asking what triggered the reaction. And a person who does not understand their own psychology becomes easier for somebody else to manipulate. So when I say return to Kemet, I am not asking you to travel backward. I'm asking you to recover a discipline of observation and bring it forward. Study human behavior. Study language. Study symbols. Study power. Study nature. Study yourself. Recover Ren without becoming trapped by names. Practice Heka without confusing words for reality. Recognize Isfet even when it wears a suit and calls itself order. Practice Ma'at even when imbalance is profitable. And practice Keperu, because understanding without transformation is merely another collection of information. I am not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to make manipulation harder by teaching you how to examine why you think what you think. I'm not here to replace your master. I'm here to question why the human mind keeps searching for masters. I'm not here to create another consumer. I'm here to cultivate an observer. Because the final liberation is not changing who programs you. It is understanding the programming process so deeply that you consciously participate in the construction of your own mind. That is how the mental chain breaks. That is how Ren is recovered. That is how Heka becomes conscious. That is how Isfet is recognized. That is how Ma'at becomes practice. And that is how Keperu transforms ancient wisdom from something hanging on a museum wall into something living inside the human being again. Understand the mechanism, and the mechanism can no longer hide from you. Ashe.